breaking down the battle for who will be the new starting quarterback at the University of Virginia next season. Hey, Chris Graham here with some UVA football news and notes. Brennan Armstrong is headed out the door, almost certainly to greener pastures. We've known that for a few weeks. And so after a disastrous year one of UVA football, it's looking ahead to year two. We're pretty much at that stage now. Des Kitchings is back as offensive coordinator. Good news or not there. Last year should have been easy for Kitchings to some degree. But when the decision was made by Tony Elliott to delay hiring an offensive coordinator until after all the offensive linemen then decided to leave from that 2021 group that had paved such a nice way for Brennan Armstrong on that offense to put up record-setting numbers at Virginia in 2021, it turned out not to be a very pleasant year offensively for the Cavaliers. A big step back in 2022. Now Armstrong is gone. His top wideouts are gone. And then after rebuilding the offensive line for the 2022 season, 4 of those starters are gone. So it's going to be another rebuild for this Virginia offense. And the biggest question mark going into the spring, well, the offensive line, obviously, with 4 starters gone, but also the quarterback position. Now, from the offensive line standpoint, Elliott does not even have an offensive line coach. Garrett Tujague has decided to leave to reunite with Robert Anae at NC State after Anae, who had gone after leaving Virginia, had gone to Syracuse to be the offensive coordinator. Anae then went to NC State to take the job there, and he brought Tujague with him. The quarterback room is a different beast. There's not a lot of warm bodies in the offensive line room. There's plenty of people in the quarterback room for Virginia. It's just a matter now of how to figure out who the starting quarterback is. The best options, first, we'll start with Jay Woolfolk and Tony Muskett. Now, Woolfolk is a known commodity to Virginia fans, probably more for his baseball to this stage. He did get one start in 2021 when Brennan Armstrong was injured at the end of the BYU game. Woolfolk started the Notre Dame game. Didn't do so well, but considering, he was a true freshman going into that environment. It was a tough battle there for Woolfolk. Didn't get a lot of action in 2022. He got in to the end of the Illinois game, I know, and actually led a drive when Armstrong went down to injury. Then Armstrong replaced him towards the end of that drive. And so other than that, there was a little bit of mop-up duty for Woolfolk. He also got some snaps at Wildcat quarterback, even though I don't think he actually had a snap at Wildcat quarterback. They just put him in the backfield alongside Armstrong to create a Wildcat kind of look. He lined up some at wide receiver, some at running back. Didn't get a lot of touches in those looks. So he's 2 years into his college career. Effectively with the red shirt last year, he could have a long time theoretically to be a project at quarterback for Virginia, if not for the fact that he's such a talented baseball prospect. And that's sort of the issue here with Jay Woolfolk as a potential starter at quarterback in 2023 for Virginia. Just because Woolfolk, a sophomore, heading into a sophomore season as a baseball player, is expected to battle for a spot in the starting rotation for Virginia so I guess next month when the team comes back for practice, for classes, and then for practice ahead of the late February start to the 2023 season. If he gets a weekend rotation spot, then that really complicates what he could do in terms of spring practice in March and April to learn the offense, to get the reps you would need in offense to be the number one quarterback. And Tony Elliott saying last week, actually had his presser to talk more about the 2023 recruiting class. He did answer some questions about the roster, and he said, I don't want to hinder that progress. Elliott said, talking about Woolfolk and his baseball career. But at the same time, if he wants to be a starting quarterback at the University of Virginia, he's going to have to be present in practice. And so there's your issue. Now, Elliott did mention that after the Christmas holiday, the New Year's holiday, that he plans to sit down with Brian O'Connor, the UVA baseball coach, and try to work together a plan for how Woolfolk could get some action at quarterback in the spring practice, balance that out with what he would need to do as a potential starter, a weekend starter for the UVA baseball team. There's things you got to do in terms of throwing to keep sharp and keep in shape and that kind of thing from an arm perspective as a pitcher. Then also he's also a student athlete. That means he's also a student at UVA. So you have to balance all that for that period of time and not have it be too much of a drain on any of those three or all three of those three, I guess you could say. Now, again, here's the complication. Woolfolk is a MLB prospect. He was a top 5 round projected prospect ahead of the 2021 draft before he decided to come to Virginia as a two-sport athlete. His freshman year, he was the setup man in the back end of the bullpen for Brian O'Connor. 97 mile per hour fastball, 2.87 ERA, a 2.11 opponent batting average, 55 strikeouts in 37 and 2/3 innings. Kind of numbers that if he were able to build on that and show himself as a starter this year, that he could really, in baseball, you can be drafted after your third season, after your junior season, your third year at UVA. So that would be 2024 for him. But if he continues to progress as expected, as UVA baseball fans would hope, it's not out of the realm of possibility. He could be a first or second round pick in 2024. He's not started his college football career yet, right? He's only had the one start, a little bit of mop up duty this year. So, the thing that you have to think about here is it's entirely possible that he looks at this and decides that baseball is his future. I mean, the football is very uncertain for him. He could put a lot of effort into it and not even win the starting job, because we'll talk about the depth at quarterback for Virginia in a second. And if he's not willing to put that, the attention into football, maybe he needs to put it into baseball. He could try to do both. Could certainly do that. He tried to do that last spring. Didn't get a lot of reps at quarterback, but he did do a lot of study with the new offensive brain trust. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens there. The other candidate is Tony Muskett, the Monmouth transfer, 3-year starter at Monmouth at the FCS level, 14-9 record as a starting quarterback at Monmouth in his 3 seasons. He had to miss the final 4 games of 2022 with a knee injury, but he was a first-team All-Big South guy his first couple of seasons, 2020 and 2021. He was a Big South Offensive Freshman of the Year in 2020. He threw for 5,687 yards, 51 touchdowns, 16 INTs, a 64% completion rate. So, you do the math there. He's throwing for roughly 250 yards a game, a couple touchdowns every game, 0.75 interceptions per game. These are good numbers. Coming out of high school, he had just one FBS offer for Coastal Carolina. After he entered the transfer portal following his junior season, he would still have 2 years of eligibility left at Virginia because of the COVID transfer year. He had offers that included Coastal Carolina again, and also the other one that I would say will be attractive, Missouri, from the SEC. Missouri played in a bowl game. So, I mean, he also had Arkansas State, Ball State, Bowling Green, Georgia State, Miami of Ohio. So Muskett is 6'2", 210-pound guy. He's from Northern Virginia. He played at West Springfield, 3-star recruit coming out of high school, low 3-star, I guess, with the fact he didn't have a lot of great college offers coming out of high school. But he's a big guy. He's got an arm, good arm. And from Tony Elliott's perspective, he addressed this last week in his presser about signing day, that just a natural fit. He was very technically sound. When we watched him, he was very technically sound. He's had to throw the ball up in an area where it's very windy. He was very successful. He's got good accuracy. And basically, we were looking for a guy, he said, with experience. We're looking for somebody that was going to come in and truly compete. And so this is a guy that certainly will come in and compete. And if it's all up on the even level, if it's Woolfolk giving his full attention, or even as full attention as he can give with baseball season, to getting reps and getting some action in spring against Muskett, it could be a nice battle. You got a very veteran guy here against a guy with potential in Woolfolk. The depth comes. There's a lot of guys in the quarterback room at Virginia. A few guys who probably aren't going to be part of the mix, so I won't even mention them here. But the 2023 signee, the only quarterback signed in the 2023 class, a guy named Anthony Calandria, a 3-star dual threat quarterback from St. Petersburg, Florida. The Virginia guys think he could be a bit of a diamond in the rough, that maybe they found somebody that other people had overlooked. He was a guy who threw for 3,137 yards and 28 touchdowns last year. He also ran for 657 yards and ran for 6 TDs. He's a guy that is looked at as a guy that, give him a couple of years in the system, redshirt him his first year, give him a chance in second year to compete for the backup job, he might be a guy that you can build around in a couple of years. So that's the expectation, the hope at least, not expectation. We'll say hope for Anthony Colandrea. Now, and so I mentioned him just to say he could be in the mix in year one for one of the backup jobs. It's hard to expect him to compete for the starting job as a true freshman, but, we'll see. A couple of intriguing prospects from guys in the class of 2022. Delaney Crawford, a very athletic 6'3", three-star recruit that had caught the attention so much of Tony Elliott and his staff that Elliott was trying to figure out ways to get Crawford on the field in 2022, even not at quarterback, trying to use him as a kick returner. They decided eventually not to do that, but they were working him out at kick returner to see if they can just get his athleticism on the field to get something out of him in that first year. And a guy that they could have done that with, another athletic quarterback, a Virginia native, Davis Lane Jr., came from Liberty Christian. And he's a guy that, in addition to, just like Crawford was also a very successful high school sprinter. Lane was a 55 meters champion in high school and as a sprinter too. So another guy that, athleticism at quarterback. That's, these are guys, both those young men recruited by the previous staff. They would fit really well in Robert Anai's offense. And, I'm sure after a year running scout teams and that kind of thing, for example, Crawford was asked to emulate Malik Cunningham ahead of the Louisville game, and apparently did so well from the observers that we heard from. So that's a very nice comparison. Malik Cunningham's a guy that might get a look in the NFL draft this coming year. Somebody from those three. I mean, this is assuming that Woolfolk stays in the mix, and that Muskett is obviously there. Those are the 1 and 2 guys, whichever order you choose. You're going to want at least one from Colandrea, Crawford, and Lane to at least emerge to be your number 3 guy. You want a really good set number 3 guy. And depending on what happens, if Woolfolk decides to either opt out of football or if he just stays with baseball so much in the spring that the decision is sort of made for him that he's going to be in the mix for number 2 or number 3 spot, you might need two of those guys between Colandrea, Crawford, and Lane to step up and be potentially number 2 and number 3 next year. So that's a situation. If it was me running the program, and I'm not, obviously, but if it was me running the program, I might want to try to find one more guy on the transfer portal, a guy kind of like Muskett, who can compete. Maybe a guy who's, he was a backup somewhere last year, lost the starting job in the FBS level, or competed really well for one and just didn't win out in the end. Maybe an FCS guy who has a pedigree kind of like Muskett did. That would make me feel more comfortable, but it seems like from the way Tony Elliott talked last week, this is the group he's going with. So we'll talk more UVA football. We're monitoring the transfer portal, both guys entering the portal from Virginia, the interest that Virginia is getting from guys who are on the portal from other schools, as Virginia looks to fill needs. I think at quarterback there might be a need, but certainly on the offensive line, there are some defensive positions that cornerback is one that really stands out as a need through the portal this year, perhaps. We'll be monitoring that. We'll be monitoring the latest developments across the board. Any news on coaching, for example, offensive line needs a new coach. We'll have all those updates and more. Go to AugustaFreePress.com for the latest on both UVA basketball, UVA football news, other sports news. And if you have any questions for me, any comments for me, any stories you want me to look into, perhaps, email me at chris@AugustaFreePress.com.